But before we get to that, we have to talk a little bit about domestic politics here in the United States. Um, it's still anyone's guess what's going to happen regarding this infrastructure bill or the budget reconciliation process. Let's start with the good news, though, for sure. Bernie Sanders continues to stand, frankly, almost alone most of the time, fighting for the American working people. And he's trying to use the tools at his disposal to pressure Democrats into putting a lot of good stuff into the budget reconciliation bill. Notably, and this is one of those rare things where we do get really excited about what's happening in Congress in relation to the PRO Act. Now, the posture of the Democratic Party in relation to the parliamentarian, who I think everybody who has any sense understands as somebody who can and should be overruled, especially when we're talking about things that are designed to help out the American people. The question still stands: will the Democratic Party have the backbone to stand up against a parliamentarian that is almost sure to try to block any of these more progressive parts of the budget reconciliation bill? But, we should take some good news as it comes. Anyways, what will happen with this is certainly an open question.
Yeah.
Certainly with regards to the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, I mean, just to flesh that out a little bit, so reconciliation means it has to, like you said, go through parliamentarian. So the first wave of cold water to go over this announcement was, okay, this is going to be just axed out. Now, Brandon Magner, who's got a Substack, Labor Law Light, makes a case here that the PRO Act would pay for itself. So the bill's provisions for labor laws, fines, makes it a budgetary slam dunk. Now, I haven't, the thing is moving so fast, so I haven't really dug into this because eventually the bill will become more concrete. But it really depends on like how much of the PRO Act actually is able to get through reconciliation. And again, this is the sort of thing where all this new spending is great. The other good thing is they're extending the child tax allowance credit till 2025 is my understanding, which makes it more pertinent because then it comes up in 2025 again. And I haven't been following that closely because I don't plan on having kids, but I did go through the calculator earlier. And if let's say I'm earning $75,000 a year and I have 2 children under 6, that's going to get me $600 a month in payments. And then on my 2021 tax return, I got an additional $3,600 credit. So that's nice. And that's going to be good money for parents. I'm curious if we have any parents in the audience. Let us know, because those checks start going out tomorrow. And so like these are the structural things, and we're not going to get as much as we want. Jayapal came out after this and said that she expects expansion of the age of the eligibility for Medicare in it. David Dayen says he doesn't see that. So and the problem is like, so what definitely is in there, or almost certainly I should say, is an expansion of benefits. And that's good, but unless you're expanding the eligibility, you're not getting closer to total coverage. And that's ultimately where like people need to be agitating for Medicare for all, right? Like that, if we're because ultimately if you expand those benefits, you may create a situation where it makes it harder to continue expanding that. Not to like say expanding benefits is bad. You just the politics of where the stuff could go. So yeah, how much of the PRO Act and that good things should come in this thing. It just remains to see, again, trust but verify, or don't distrust and verify, I think is probably the better approach.
Yeah. And honestly, like the cynical side of me really does see some of these proposals that we're seeing in the, in this reconciliation process in the budget bill to just be a laundry list of things for Democrats to try to run on in 2022. To say like, oh, we weren't able to get this because we didn't have a large enough majority, right? But again, you get these things in, I'm happy, right? It's important and I support it. But I don't want to sit around and make predictions about what's going to happen in Congress. I really wanted to spend this bit of time talking about the undeniable reality of the need, not just for climate action, but a fundamental shift in the way that we live. At this point, there is no other way to frame it or to understand it than this. Incrementalism at this point is climate denial. And that is all that we are seeing from Congress, right? We're having these conversations right now about them cutting down proposals that were inadequate from the start, right? There is nothing that is being pushed at the congressional level right now that comes near close to addressing the fundamental problems that we face. Climate catastrophe is an undeniable fact, but it's not abstract at all. It's something we're feeling as we speak, but it's still presented in this way as if it's some kind of abstract problem that we're going to face down the line. 107 people in Oregon are dead because of this unprecedented heat wave. And it's workers who are forced to put their lives at risk to fuel the machine of capitalism. The American wheat crop is in peril. And an early draft of a UN report has shown that species extinction, widespread disease, unlivable heat, collapse of entire ecosystems, cities threatened by rising sea levels are all coming to a child that would be born today by the time that they are 30. We're talking about the tax credits for children right now.
Yeah.
We're not even in a position right now where we can guarantee that there will be a livable planet for the next generation of people. Let that sink in for a second, and then watch the theater that's going on at the congressional level. The Believe Science crowd, that kind of slogan, it has permeated our culture and certainly our marketing at this point. But politically, it's still symbolism. What's been going on this past week? The major news story has been Whitey on the moon, right? The billionaire space race. Will it be Branson or Bezos or Elon? Which bloated billionaire will launch himself into space while the planet burns? Matt, if you could pull up this first story here, because you would think that the deaths and the devastation that we're seeing in the Pacific Northwest, along with the coming wildfires, would allow us to have better coverage of climate change. But as this piece in Gizmodo points out, why TV is so bad at covering climate change by Molly Taft, I'll just read this first bit to y'all. On Saturday, Catherine Hyho, I apologize if I mispronounced that, a climate scientist at Texas Tech University, tweeted that she'd be appearing on CNN to talk to Fareed Zakaria about the record-breaking heat wave gripping the West. The next day, she announced her segment had been bumped, due to Billionaire going to space, she wrote. Hyho was slated to appear on CNN as Death Valley was clocking the highest temperature ever reliably recorded on the planet, on the heels of another heat wave that killed hundreds of people across the Pacific Northwest and Canada. Meanwhile, Richard Branson spent 3 or 4 minutes waitlist to advertise a spaceship that will offer seats for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and earned wall-to-wall coverage on broadcast networks this weekend, many of which aired footage on his brief joyride. That's the reality of the media right now, and it does not get better when it comes to politicians and certainly to political media. In addition to these stories of what's happening in the west of this country, today, The Guardian reported for the first time ever, we have this as well, for the first time ever, the Amazon rainforest is now going to emit more CO2 than it absorbs. These are planetary failures of systems. This is how we are able to sustain ourselves, how we're able to breathe air. This is the necessary building blocks of life, and they're under threat. And what do we get from our political media, right? You get a political class that's proposing middling proposals, refusal to take the systemic action necessary, right? They want to be able to say when they go up for re-election in 2022, oh, we're trying to fight for climate change, right? We believe science, all this kind of stuff, right? They still see this as a political, football to play around with, instead of something that is a moral, Jesus Christ, just a basic survival instinct imperative to start to address. So you're getting these middling proposals from the Democrats, and then of course, complete wahoo stuff from the GOP, which still, is trying to challenge the science of climate change. And then you have people like rich pundits like Matt Iglesias, who Matt and I were talking about during the think tank on Monday for patrons. Matt Iglesias sitting around scolding youth climate activists in the Sunrise Movement to say, well, actually, Biden's plan does address climate change. It's building some electric vehicle charging stations across the country, right? I mean, it's absurd when you look at the size of the United States economy and you see what they're talking about putting forward, and you remember that this was the promise that they were actually going to fundamentally do something. The pragmatists, the centrists, the realists were finally going to address climate change. We're nowhere near real action. It's score settling. It's appeasement. Have a monetary figure that you can point to during the Democrats' seemingly doomed 2022 elections, right? Oh, you say climate change is real? Well, look, we built some electric vehicle stations. We're going to plug some mines. As we're recording this right now, there are lobbyists on the phone trying to cut spending in both this budget reconciliation bill and in the infrastructure bill. Redirecting the funding in ways that's going to profit them and make them more and more money, or trying to market themselves as green. The Verge reported that 92% of S&P companies have vowed to cut their emissions. But when you look behind the nice press releases, right, you see actually no really functional material. Material commitment to addressing these problems, right? You see that green marketing is very effective. People across the globe recognize that there's a problem, but nobody fundamentally wants to do anything about it. And in politics, especially in the United States right now, it's a great way to sell yourself as somebody who takes climate change seriously. But if you're not serious about what needs to be done, then you're doing the same kind of game as the Republicans. And I just want to be concrete for a moment. Right. I don't want to play games GOP versus Democrats, because frankly, the world is at a point where having those kind of conversations about the American political parties is almost a sideshow. What needs to be done? What is to be done? Believe science. Oh, climate change is real. Listen to the science. All of these slogans are now being exposed as being extremely hollow, as is this practical, the Biden approach, which is feigning action, right? Putting a little bit of money here and there to some projects, right? Which again, is better than nothing, but it sure as hell is not enough.
Yeah, I mean, we're still in like 2008, as if it's Biden's first term as vice president. Like drilling, right? Just one metric. Biden's been drilling like a motherfucker. Like Trump has a 3-month span that's a record. Biden's second. And he's been killing it, and it's because they're viewed as partners. Oil and gas is viewed as partners to the transition. If you look at all of Biden's, like Deb Haaland, right? She should conceivably be Biden's most anti. Because I think like there's another woman, I can't remember her name, but she went up to Williston to basically tell the oil and gas, Williston, North Dakota, oil country, the Bakken oil boom place, that hey, we're going to be good. And the way they couch it is, it's funny. Like they'll steal enough Green New Deal framing, which is like we want to make sure every worker here is taken care of, but ultimately, it's about taking care of the executives and what their priorities are. But it's oil and gas is a partner, and I don't know if we want to get too ahead of ourselves, but you contrast that with the way Lula handled Amazon deforestation.
Yeah.
I have actually I can
pull that up.
Here. Got that right now. I was looking at this article here, Guardian, that Amazon rainforest will collapse if Bolsonaro remains president. President academics and activists issue warning amid fresh assault on environmental protections. And this paragraph, a few paragraphs into it, Amazon deforestation reduced 80% between 2004 and 2012 under the Workers' Party administration of Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Bolsonaro has steadily dismantled or discredited the mechanisms that achieved that, like monitoring personnel on the ground and legislation to punish offenders and demarcate indigenous land and conservation areas. Now, if you can take tens of millions of people out of poverty while protecting the rainforest, I'd say like that's a type of politics that people should be listening to.
I think that's 100% point, right? And also a good reminder of some of the kind of pseudo green criticisms of Lula that we saw after his, after the illegal coup against him. But before we go to Victor and we talk a little bit more about Brazil, I want to hit this, and I want to make these things very clear, right? Because you can talk about the political calculus that you have to do dealing with Congress. You can talk about all these kind of things. But frankly, I think it's time that we start making the case to the people about what an actual alternative would look like and what we need to do to meet this moment. We can't fall for these abstractions. To confront climate change, we have to control these things. We have to control industry. We have to control transportation. And that's why the infrastructure bill is important. Remember, when you make a decision to go to the grocery store and you drive your car or whatever, right? You're doing that because of the infrastructure that's around you, right? That is what dictates our decisions much more than your own kind of moral, feelings of responsibility, right? Access is critical here, and that's why infrastructure and having a green transportation program needs to be something that's democratically controlled for the people, not just for special interests. We need to control energy production and distribution. That means controlling your own power sources, the power distribution projects and plants, right? And also taking into public control as much as possible industries like oil, natural gas, and coal. Right. We also need to be controlling agriculture, and we need to be creating a national program to re-up and re-equip buildings with green technology and green ways to prevent, freezing in the winter and overheating in the summer.
I mean, we have a great opportunity to do that after the collapse in Florida. David Dayen had a good bit in the American Prospect that a lot of these high rises were built after 80s deregulation, and maybe we might have some other problems, and that might not be the only one that has some structural issues. So we absolutely we need to check things for soundness. We need maintenance, and then future infrastructure on top of that. You'll hear a lot of talk about how great it is that we're spending $4.1 trillion, and obviously the point we already said about the structural things being important, but we need to spend lots, because we have not been spending nearly enough just to maintain the society that we've inherited.
We need to spend lots, right? But also know that, the spending is one thing, the control and the shift is another, right? We simply can't do these things with market incentives, right? You can't create nice, you can't just do it through subsidies, and you can't just do it through tax breaks. You need central planning. Right? When you look at the history of industrialization, what happened in the United Kingdom and Europe when it came to building the railways and using coal power and steam power was a world historic, unique moment where market incentives work to basically reorient an entire economy and an entire society in a different direction than it had been 50 years in the past, right? We don't have time for that. And I'm going to tell you right now, the money's still in the coal and the oil and the natural gas. And if we don't shift that, if we rely on this engine, capitalism, to deliver us a green energy, we will be waiting on a planet that is on fire. In the United States, we have a bold history of this kind of thing. We have the TVA, which has some issues, right? But it took a bold and expansive mandate for itself to understand we're going to electrify a part of the country that has not had this. And we're also going to use this as a way to reinvigorate the economy, give people opportunity, give people education. And that's something that we should be upholding today. We have to. This is non-negotiable. We have to have democratic control of our energy production and our grids. What's happening in the Northwest right now is an example of that. What happened in Texas in February is an example of that. Hell, what's happening in Texas right now? It's hot in Texas again, surprise. And we're already starting to see warning signs that the grid might fail again, right? This has to be under public control, not in the service of private interests. We have to fully fund a climate core. We have the opportunity to do that. We have the need to do that right now. And we must fully take advantage of any opportunity to capture more and more of the oil industry, as what happened under COVID-19 gave us a huge opportunity to try to seize those things. I don't care about the Democrats and the GOP anymore. We know what needs to be done, And we need to make this case clear to people, because the false fight between the believe science Dems, right, who are just willing to do green symbolism, and climate change denying GOP is going to get us nowhere but a world of hurt.
Here's a counterpoint. Elon
Too worked
Musk.
up for this.
Those who attack space maybe don't realize that space represents hope for so many people.
Yeah. That is what your future is if we don't do anything. Your future is an escape plan led by wackos like Elon Musk. I much prefer a democratic socialist future where we take control of our society and of our missions.
You imagine Elon Musk leading your space colony, the guy that like accused a rescue diver of being a pedophile because he wouldn't use his fancy submarine. Like, you think that guy's?
Yeah, I forgot about that shit. Man, this guy actually was so upset that the divers who were saving those children, was it in Thailand or was it in Indonesia? It was in Indonesia, wasn't it? I can't remember off the top of my head. The divers who were saving those kids didn't want to wait for Elon Musk to design some special little boy-sized submarine.
This is a guy who has been at parties and photographed with Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yes.
And he said sus about a guy that wouldn't use his fucking submarine.
Well, he publicly accused the guy of being a pedophile. Which, Matt, you made a good point. I don't know if you remember this.
Yes, which is that like there's two possible ways that he's right there, which is, or two like solutions are: one, he just libeled somebody, and two, he has inside information, probably because he's like friends with Peter Thiel or something, or he like hires private eyes or whatever the fuck to like sleuth into the guy, which is concerning. And he's sitting on that information, like he knows about it.
Making it public.
Instead of making it public, he's sitting on it and just dripping it out as a way to try to get his submarine used. So.